Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is minorities and AIDS. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about minorities and AIDS, Ms. Sheila Dennie. Ms. Dennie is the director for the Tennessee AIDS Training Education Center at Meharry Medical College. And of course with Ms. Dennie is Mr. Ron Crowder. Mr. Crowder is a case manager with Project COPE. And of course, Mr. Crowder will tell us the initials for the meaning for the initials of Project COPE later on during the show. First of all, let me welcome both of you, Ms. Dennie and Mr. Crowder, to the show this morning.
Thank you.
And to indeed say that to talk about what we consider to be a very, very important topic this morning. And if you listen to the media, you understand that AIDS has had a tremendous impact, a tremendous health impact, not only on African Americans and other minorities, but on the entire American population. But today we want to deal with what minorities and AIDS. And of course, Ms. Dennie, before we do that, let's have you for a second time, I think, because you were with us earlier on an earlier show, for the second time to give us some information about your background and your education and some of the things that were important in terms of leading you to one of the warriors in this great army against HIV and AIDS.
Well, my educational background stems from earlier my undergraduate degree in psychology at Howard University, and then I did my graduate work at Alabama A&M in Normal, Alabama, near Huntsville, also in psychology. I guess behavior, Dr. Haney, has always been an interest and a concern of mine, especially as it impacts people of color, with particular interest to African Americans. Young people, in addition, have been very important, near and dear to me, because I am a mother. I have two daughters. Coming to Nashville, initially working at Vanderbilt, I later became employed at Meharry for the Tennessee AIDS Education and Training Center, which is also affiliated with the Area Health Education Center's programs of Meharry. The mission of our program, which is funded by HRSA, is to train healthcare providers to keep them updated with the latest developments in HIV, with particular interest to minority health providers or providers who treat minority patients, meaning rural, underserved, African American, poor, or any of those different categories.
So it's just a broad definition of what is meant by minorities when we talk about minorities and AIDS. We're not specifically talking about a racial minority. We're talking about an economic minority and etc.
Exactly.
Okay, very
underserved,
good.
Underrepresented politically, in terms of underrepresented accessing health services.
In other words, these are the folks that we are unable to somehow reach with ease with the various means of communications that we have, that we can reach everybody else. These are the minorities.
Most readily, yes.
Mr. Crowder, what about you and your background and how you became involved with COPE, Project COPE? Talk about that organization as
well. Well, first of all, Project COPE is an African American outreach walk-in type clinic. And COPE is an acronym for Community Outreach for Prevention and Education of HIV and AIDS. Or how I became involved in the organization is that their target population is African Americans, injection drug users, and their sex partners. I myself am a recovering addict, and also I was a former IV drug user. And I too am infected with HIV, where at this point I have full-blown AIDS. But that's what attracted me to it, the way in which African Americans perceive the disease or the infection as a whole. And I thought that maybe I could make a difference in relaying the information and, you know, propagating the, getting rid of the old myth that, you know, infection equals death. Infection equals no more life, you know.
Or no hope.
Or no hope, you know. Exactly.
You know, Ms. Dennie, I think when we talk about it, and I know that you're not a medical doctor, but let's talk about the disease itself. That is, from your perspective, the kind of information that you have relative to this disease. What is AIDS and why the tremendous impact that it's having on the American health system and the whole thing. What is
Well,
this?
first of all, we need to talk about HIV, which is the human immunodeficiency virus. And that is what leads a person to later develop into, as Ron says, full-blown AIDS. Once the virus enters the immune system, that system which we have been created with to help combat disease, it acts as a real stealth bomber, because it invades the healthy cells and then encodes it with its own HIV message and has that healthy cell thinking that it itself is HIV. It becomes HIV, then the new virions are then given birth throughout the body. Once the presence of opportunistic infections such as Kaposi sarcoma or pneumocystis pneumonia, or with women, recurrent vaginal candidiasis or cervical cancer, or a CD4 count of below 200, then you move to the category of AIDS, which is acquired immune deficiency syndrome. I think one thing that is important, especially for people of color, is in looking at the terms, you see that it's human, so you don't get it from a mosquito or a monkey or some of the other things that, you know, are promoted as possible origins of the disease, and it's also acquired.
I wanted you to explain that.
Yeah, it's acquired, meaning you have to do something to get it. It's not going to leap out and jump on you while you're walking down the street using the restroom facility at the swimming pool or hugging a friend. You have to have actual exchange of body fluids. Those body fluids are blood, semen, and vaginal secretion in order to become at risk for being infected.
And so it's a behavioral disease as well as a health problem.
Yes.
And if people could better check their behavior, then perhaps they could we could better deal with this as a national disease. What do you say about that, Mr. Crowder?
I agree wholeheartedly. It's at Project COPE, that's the way we counsel. We do risk reduction counseling. We assess a person's risk, and then we start working on them changing that particular behavior in order to reduce their risk of becoming HIV. And one of the things I tell people, it's not who you are, it's what you do that puts you at risk for HIV.
Exactly.
You know, and you know, even after a person becomes infected, and I think African Americans more so than any other population, is that they totally shut down, go in denial, and seems like they can't talk to anybody about it, and what they're actually doing is wreaking havoc upon themselves, because once they find out they're infected, then they don't want to go to the doctor to seek medical care. And now with the newer treatments and all the advances that they've made in HIV treatment these days, you know, it's almost now chronic illness. This is
like asthma or diabetes.
Right.
Well, now I think, SDennie, as a person who's interested in behavior, why this out-and-out denial? And is that peculiar among I don't want to raise this. We got only a minute. But is that peculiar among African Americans?
It's not genetically inherent, but we do have some societal issues with the history of the way African Americans and our system of justice and health has impacted our communities. When you think of the notorious Tuskegee experiment, and how that impacted public health policy, how it impacted the perceptions of community people regarding health care. The notion of HIV being something that is associated with genocide becomes easy to accept, especially if other people of color, you know, Latinos and sometimes Asians, along with African Americans, have had negative dealings with institutions and systems of our society.
Very good. Let's, Ms. Denny, let us take this first commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about other aspects of this problem. And we'll be back with you following this short commercial break. And, Mr. Ron Crowder.